12 days have passed. Nolan Wells' body has been found. But right now, nobody, not even his family, knows exactly what happened to him. 2 autopsies have been performed. One by the state, one independent, ordered by the family. Both, as of today, have said nothing. Now, if you watched our first video on Nolan Wells, you already know the story. This video does not retell it. This video answers one question. Since then, what has actually changed and what is still unresolved? There was a meeting between the family and the prosecutor, a news statement from the sheriff, a funeral date has been set, and another layer of misinformation has had to be cleared up. We're going to walk you through all of it, in order. No speculation, no conclusions ahead of the evidence, only what has been confirmed and what, right now, is still waiting to be said. Before we get to the update, here's a very quick background for anyone who hasn't seen the first video, or who needs a refresher. Nolan Xavier Wells, 18, from Ocean Springs, Mississippi. He just graduated high school in 2025, played wide receiver, and was getting ready to head back to Southwest Mississippi Community College for a new football season. On July 4th, Nolan and 3 friends took out a boat from a private dock in Ocean Springs, headed for Horn Island, an uninhabited barrier island with no drinking water, no shelter, no cell signal, roughly 8 to 10 miles offshore. Around 3 p.m., Nolan was seen for the last time on the island's beach. He said goodbye to his friends, and according to the group, he chose to stay behind, planning to come back to the mainland later with a different group. By around 4:30, the boat left the island without him. Around 11 p.m. that night, the family got a call. A large-scale search launched almost immediately, involving local police, the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources, and the U.S. Coast Guard. On the morning of July 6th, Nolan's body was found in the water, right off the northwest tip of Horn Island, the exact spot where he was last seen. Since then, several disputed details have surfaced, conflicting accounts of Nolan's final 90 minutes on the island, the fact that his phone turned up on the mainland inside a friend's house instead of with him, and the family's suspicion that data on that phone had been deleted. Now, hold on to that detail because it's going to come back later when we talk about what both the family and the police are still waiting to have clarified. The Jackson County Sheriff's Department says there is no evidence a crime occurred, and they're investigating this as a drowning. Nolan's family isn't satisfied with that answer, so they brought in civil rights attorney Ben Crump, brought Reverend Al Sharpton in to speak publicly, and commissioned an independent autopsy, funded by former NFL player Colin Kaepernick, demanding a more transparent investigation. That's everything you need to understand the update that follows. If you want the full story with every detail, every witness account, our first video is already up. Link in the description. Now, let's talk about what's new. A photo of Nolan at a pool party started spreading fast on social media. People shared it with captions claiming it was taken on July 4th, the day he went missing. That's false. The photo has nothing to do with that day. At the same time, some AI-generated content simulating details of the case also began circulating. Nolan's mother, Christine Wansley, was forced to publicly correct the record on Facebook. She said she understood why people wanted the truth, but she also asked the public to stop spreading unverified content. This detail matters because it reveals a second front to this case, not the investigation on the ground, but the fight to keep the truth from getting buried under rumor. And this isn't unique to this case. In almost every story that draws national attention, there's a parallel version of events circulating online, faster, more dramatic, and usually unverified. Nolan Wells' case is no exception. What's different here is that the victim's own family has had to become the one shutting down rumors, a job that they have never taken on in the middle of their grieving. The Mississippi Coast Coliseum and Convention Center in Biloxi confirmed it has approved the use of the venue to hold Nolan Wells' funeral. The service is set for July 20th. Center management says they're coordinating closely with family representatives to finalize timing and logistics. The fact that a large convention center, not a standard funeral home, was chosen as the venue says something about the scale of public attention this case has drawn. This is no longer a private family funeral. It has become a community event. As of today, the state's official autopsy results still not released. The toxicology report still pending. The independent autopsy results requested by the family and funded by Colin Kaepernick also not made public. Which means 12 days after the body was found, the most fundamental question, the exact cause of death, still has no official answer from either side. A lot of you are asking the same question. Why does the family need an independent autopsy if the state already performed an official one? So here's the explanation, based on standard US forensic procedure, not speculation specific to this case. We have the state's official autopsy. This is the autopsy performed by the state medical examiner's office, typically ordered by investigators whenever a death is considered unusual, unexplained, or in need of clarification. The findings from this autopsy become the official record used in the investigative file, and later, if it gets that far, in the file presented to a grand jury. The state medical examiner works independently from the police, but it remains part of the public system, meaning they report within a government process. Then, we have the independent autopsy. This is an autopsy the victim's family actively requests and pays for, in this case, funded by Colin Kaepernick, performed by a private forensic pathologist outside the state system. Families typically request independent autopsies, especially in contested cases, to have a second, completely separate dataset, to cross-check the official findings, or to make sure nothing was missed. An independent autopsy's findings don't replace the state's official results and legally carry no binding weight in the prosecution file. But they can be used to raise questions, push for additional investigation, or serve as supporting evidence if the case moves towards a civil lawsuit. So what happens if the two results don't match? This is a scenario that has played out in similar cases before, which is why it's worth explaining carefully. If the independent pathologist reaches a different conclusion than the state examiner on cause of death, time of death, or the presence of an injury, that discrepancy typically becomes the central point of controversy in the next phase of the case. It doesn't automatically mean one side is right and the other is wrong. Forensic pathologists can interpret the same evidence differently, especially in cases where a body has spent time in water. But if there is a discrepancy, it will almost certainly become public, and it will almost certainly become the next media flashpoint. As of today, neither result, state or independent, has been released. So this remains an open question, not something that has already happened. This is the part most people skip past, but it's the key to understanding what happens next in this case. Sheriff Ledbetter confirmed the case file will go to a grand jury once the investigation is complete. But that phrase gets misunderstood a lot. Here's how the process actually works, based on general Mississippi state procedure. Step 1. The investigation wraps. Once investigators have gathered all the evidence, witnesses, statements, forensic data, scene reports, and the official autopsy results, the file moves to the district attorney's office. Step 2. The prosecutor's review. The prosecutor determines whether there's enough to bring the case before a grand jury. This is the screening step before anything reaches a panel of citizens. Step 3. The grand jury session. In Mississippi, a county grand jury typically consists of around 20 citizens randomly selected from the voter rolls. At least 15 must be present for the session to be valid, and at least 12 must agree to move forward with an indictment. The session is entirely secret. No judge, no defense attorney, not even the victim's family, or the prosecutor presenting the case is allowed in the room while the grand jury votes. The prosecutor presents evidence and witnesses, usually the investigators assigned to the case, but then has to leave the room before the grand jury reaches its decision. Step 4. 3 possible outcomes. The grand jury has 3 options. 1. Return a true bill, meaning they find enough grounds for formal prosecution and an indictment is issued. 2. Return a no bill, meaning they don't find sufficient grounds to proceed. And 3. request further investigation before deciding. The most important thing to remember, a grand jury does not decide guilty or innocent. It decides whether there's enough basis to take a case to trial. Any actual conviction, if it comes to that, would happen in a completely separate trial, in front of a different jury altogether. In other words, the phrase sending the case to a grand jury, the exact words the sheriff used, does not mean anyone is about to be charged with anything. It's a required procedural step in Mississippi's justice system for deaths that warrant a closer review, regardless of whether it ends in prosecution or not. As of right now, Jackson County Police have only confirmed this step will happen once the investigation concludes. No specific timeline has been announced, so this remains a process still waiting to happen, not an event that has already occurred. In the roughly 12 days since the body was found, this case went from a local Mississippi news to something that was followed nationwide. 3 things made that happen. Factor 1, high-profile involvement. The movement's civil rights attorney Ben Crump and Reverend Al Sharpton, 2 figures who regularly appear in nationally watched civil rights cases, stepped in to represent and speak for the family. The story almost immediately outgrew local news. Colin Kaepernick funding the independent autopsy had a similar effect, given how closely his name has been tied to conversations about racial justice in America for nearly a decade. Factor 2, race. In the photo taken on the boat that day, Nolan was the only black person in the group. Given Mississippi's complicated history around race, that detail almost immediately became central to how the public read this case, even though police have never confirmed race played any direct role in Nolan's death. Factor 3, the speed of social media. As mentioned in part 2, this case is unfolding in an environment where information, both true and false, spreads almost instantly. That's created pressure for investigators to be more transparent, but it's also created the risk that unverified details get treated as fact. Sheriff Ledbetter himself has publicly acknowledged that he appreciates the public sending in tips, but has also asked people to send evidence directly to the investigators rather than just posting it online. Taken together, these 3 factors turned a missing persons case in a small coastal town into one of the most closely followed stories in American media in July 2026. Here's a list of questions that, as of this video, still don't have an official answer. We're laying them out not to speculate, but so that you know exactly what we're all still waiting on. Question 1. What's the exact cause of death? The state's autopsy results still haven't been released. Question 2. What will the toxicology report show? This is the report that could rule in or rule out several existing theories. Question 3. Will the family's independent autopsy results, once released, match the state's conclusions? As explained in part 3, if the 2 results differ, that becomes the next major flashpoint. Question 4. Will the conflicting accounts of Nolan's final 90 minutes on the island, who's right, who misremembered, ever get resolved? Question 5. When does the case file officially go to the grand jury? The sheriff confirmed it will happen, but gave no specific date. And finally, question 6. If the grand jury finds no grounds to indict anyone, what happens to the investigation next? Does the case get treated as closed, or does the family pursue this through a civil suit? These 6 questions aren't here so that you can guess the answers right now. They're a map of where this case goes over the next few weeks. If you want to know when to check back for updates, here are the 4 biggest markers to watch. 1. The date the state releases its official autopsy results. This is the most important marker, because it directly shapes where the entire case goes next. 2. The date the family's independent autopsy results come out, and whether they match the official findings. 3. The date the case finally officially reaches the grand jury, if and when that happens. And 4. Any further public statements from Attorney Crump or the family, especially after the July 20th funeral, when public attention may start to fade, but the family's demand for answers almost certainly won't. 12 days have passed since Nolan Wells' body was found. In those 12 days, there's been a meeting with the prosecutor, confirmation of the next legal step. A funeral date has been set. Another layer of misinformation the family has had to clean up themselves in the middle of grieving. But the biggest question, what actually happened to Nolan Wells, still has no official answer. We're not going to fill that gap with speculation. We're going to wait, the same way his family is waiting, until there's something confirmed. When the autopsy results are released, when the case file reaches the grand jury, or when there's any other official development, we'll be back with another update. If you don't want to miss that, subscribe and turn on notifications. For now, all we can do is wait, alongside the family who is still searching for an answer to the simplest question there is. What happened to their son? Because right now, the truth still hasn't been spoken, and on Horn Island, only the tide knows the answer.